Hey everyone, and a special hello if you're joining us from the Stock Talk feed. Welcome aboard for a deep dive. Really glad you could make it.
Absolutely. Yeah, welcome. Today we're really plunging into a stack of source material covering what's been happening in the markets recently, the latest on tariffs, trade tensions, and some, pretty significant corporate news that jumped out this past week.
Right. We've pulled from a whole range of reports,
Yeah.
CNBC, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Reuters, New York Times, CNN, AP, BBC,
And
CBS.
of course, those really crucial company earnings releases.
Yeah. Think of this as, well, your shortcut to getting up to speed. Our mission here is basically to sift through all that information, pull out the most important insights, the key nuggets.
And help you quickly understand the key developments shaping the financial world right now.
Exactly. So if you find this kind of exploration valuable, you know, cutting through the noise to get to what really matters, maybe consider subscribing to the Deep Dive feed wherever you're listening.
Yeah, that's the best way to make sure you don't miss out on future explorations like this one.
Okay, so let's unpack this. If we look back at May, the market had quite a month, a real turnaround.
Definitely. We saw the Nasdaq surge, what was it, 9.56%, S&P 500 up 6.15%, Dow gaining nearly 4%.
And even the Russell 2000, which had been lagging, right? That was
Yeah.
up 5.2%.
Crucially, all of them broke that 3-month losing streak. That's pretty widespread positive momentum.
Yeah, it suggests investors were maybe pricing in a shift, perhaps, or just reacting to, being oversold before.
Well, what's fascinating, though, is how quickly that strong positive feeling just ran into immediate headwinds, like right at the start of this week.
Futures slid pretty significantly Monday morning.
Yeah, and the sources tie it directly back to an escalation in global trade tensions. No surprise there, really.
Right, and here's where it gets, well, really interesting. The core of that renewed tension. It comes right back to tariffs.
President Trump announced he intends to double tariffs on imported steel from 25% up to 50%.
And that's effective, what, June 4th?
June 4th, yeah. And the stated reasons were, national security and protecting U.S. steelworkers.
Okay, so what was the immediate market reaction to that news?
Well, it was pretty striking, especially in specific sectors. Domestic steel stocks just surged.
Like Cleveland Cliffs?
Cleveland Cliffs jumped a massive 25%. Steel Dynamics and Nucor both popped over 10%. And the VanEck Steel ETF gained almost 2%.
Wow. So that's not just a small bump.
No, it really highlights how a specific policy decision like this can create these, well, almost artificial boosts for domestic producers, right? Potentially changing their competitive footing overnight.
Okay, so that's the U.S. stock reaction. What about internationally? What was the response on the global stage?
Well, the European Union was very quick to criticize the move. Their response warned that this could trigger countermeasures from their side.
Tit for tat again?
Potentially, yeah. They mentioned possibly as early as July 14th if no agreement is reached beforehand. So, yeah, signals a potential escalation.
And it wasn't just Europe, was it? U.S. China tensions seem to be ramping up again, too.
Definitely. The sources reported China rejected President Trump's claim they'd violated a trade truce. Beijing actually flipped it back, accusing the U.S. of breaches through tech export controls, visa restrictions.
And they warned of their own retaliation.
Exactly. And then you had Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent defending the administration's tariff moves.
Right. What was his take?
He noted that, look, some companies might absorb the costs, not raise prices, but others very well might. He framed it mainly as a national security measure, pointing to alleged Chinese violations of a trade deal.
Okay, so we've got this sudden uptick in tariff talk, trade tension. Yeah. What does this actually mean beyond just, steel stocks bouncing and diplomatic friction? Does this uncertainty connect to broader economic impacts?
Oh, absolutely. The sources draw some clear lines. One is U.S. consumer spending.
Ah, right. That slowed down.
Significantly, just 0.2% growth in April after a much stronger surge in March. And the thinking is that March surge was partly people buying before potential tariffs or price hikes kicked in.
Pre-buying, basically.
Sort of, yeah. So even though incomes are higher for many, savings rates are up, this uncertainty over trade policy seems to be weighing on confidence, both consumer and maybe business confidence, too.
Leading to more cautious spending, perhaps.
Potentially, yeah. And we also saw the International Air Transport Association, IATA, represents global airlines that cut their 2025 profit forecast.
And they mentioned tariffs?
Explicitly cited Trump-era tariffs, yeah, impacting aircraft parts and other things, and also ongoing aircraft delivery delays. Both were key reasons for lowering expectations.
Okay, and speaking of supply chains and tensions, this connects to rare earths too, right?
Critical area, yes. The U.S. is reportedly facing shortages of rare earth magnets because China has halted exports amidst these trade tensions.
And that's not a small thing.
Not at all. It disrupts major industries, automakers, tech firms rely heavily on these. It really highlights how, despite efforts to build up domestic production, the U.S. is still significantly reliant on China for these crucial materials.
Making it a real point of vulnerability in these kinds of disputes. Okay, let's shift gears a bit, move from the macro picture of markets and trade to some specific company news and deals that jumped out from the sources this week. A lot happening, particularly in pharma and biotech.
Yeah, that sector was incredibly active. First up, Sanofi is set to acquire Blueprint Medicines.
Big deal.
Potentially huge, valued at up to $9.5 billion. A key asset they're getting is an immunology drug, Ivakit. Analysts project it could hit like $2.35 billion in annual revenue by 2033.
Shows the market's willing to pay big for promising late-stage drugs.
Definitely. And then Moderna got some important FDA news.
Their next-gen COVID vaccine.
Right, MNX Spike. Approved for adults 65 plus 6 and also at-risk individuals 12 to 64. Expected to be ready for the 2025-26 season, so positioning them for future booster markets.
Okay. And there was another big healthcare partnership.
Yeah, really significant one between Bristol Myers Squibb and BioNTech, focused on a cancer drug. Bristol Myers is making a very substantial upfront payment, $1.5 billion to BioNTech.
Wow, just upfront.
Just upfront. And the total deal value could potentially top $11 billion with milestones. The focus is an antibody called BNT327.
And how's the deal structured?
It's co-development, co-commercialization, and equal profit sharing. It's a really big vote of confidence in that specific drug candidate.
And highlights that trend of big pharma partnering with biotechs for innovation.
Exactly. And BioNTech shares jumped, 13% on the news? So the market liked it.
Right. And sticking with biotech, Gilead Sciences also had some trial results. CAR-RT therapy.
Yeah, CAR-RT, that's where they modify a patient's own immune cells to fight cancer. Pretty cutting-edge stuff. In a small trial for glioblastoma patients.
That's a really aggressive brain cancer.
Exactly. The therapy showed a positive outcome, shrank tumors in 62% of them.
But there was a caveat.
There was. The sources noted the benefits were mostly short-term in this particular early trial. But Gilead's already planning a next-gen version, aiming for longer-lasting results and looking at a broader rollout. So early days, but promising signs in a tough area.
Okay, moving away from healthcare now, let's check in on travel. JetBlue and United Airlines came up.
Yeah, but specifically to clarify something important, JetBlue's CEO stated very clearly no merger plans with United.
Despite that new booking and loyalty partnership they launched.
Right. He attributed the caution directly to ongoing scrutiny from the Department of Justice regarding airline consolidation. They're being careful.
And this ties back to airlines facing headwinds, right?
Exactly. We mentioned IATA cutting forecasts due to tariffs and delivery delays. The sources add more detail there, indicating manufacturers like Boeing and Airbus are really struggling to meet airline demand.
Deliveries are falling short.
Significantly. Projections for 2025 deliveries are estimated to be like 26% below what was previously expected. That directly impacts airline growth and efficiency.
Okay, shifting gears again. Consumer goods, Mondelez suing Aldi.
Yeah, that's right. The core issue is Mondelez alleging Aldi is designing packaging for their store brand snacks, think Oreos, Wheat Thins alternatives, to look too similar to the famous brands.
Claiming trademark infringement.
Trademark infringement and brand dilution, basically arguing Aldi's confusing shoppers and piggybacking on their established brands.
Interesting. And on the earnings front in consumer goods, Campbell's
Soup Company, yeah. They had a recent release. Beat on revenue reported $2.48 billion, up about 4.5% year over year. Beat estimates by $45 million.
Net earnings per share.
Also beat EPS estimates. Came in at 0.73 cents. Now that number was actually slightly down year over year, about 2.7%, but still beat the street by 0.7 cents. Suggests they're driving sales okay, but maybe feeling some margin pressure.
Got it. Okay, let's talk tech and AI. OpenAI's future plans for ChatGPT.
Yeah, an internal document cited in the sources gave some interesting insights there.
What's the plan?
They apparently plan to evolve it significantly, aiming for it to become a super assistant.
A super assistant. What does that mean exactly?
Well, the scope is pretty broad. They envision it managing a whole range of daily tasks, handling email, calendars, helping with shopping, even complex stuff like coding.
So much more integrated into daily life and work.
Seems like it. Suggests a much more proactive role for AI and productivity than, what we typically see today.
Okay. Moving into finance. the IPO market. We heard a warning from Jamie Dimon.
Yeah, the JP Morgan CEO, he voiced concern about a potential crack looming in the U.S. bond market.
Linked to what?
Directly linked it to soaring national debt. And he noted that proposed tax plans mentioned in the sources could add another, $2.7 trillion to deficits, potentially making things worse in that critical market.
That's a notable warning from someone like him.
Definitely. And we're seeing some interesting IPO activity that maybe tells its own story about market sentiment right now.
Like Voyager Technologies.
Right. Targeting a $1.6 billion valuation, NYSE listing under VOIG, aiming to raise $319 million. And the sources note they're in defense and space.
Which is interesting given increased spending there.
Exactly. And then there's Chime, the digital banking startup.
Planning a Nasdaq IPO.
Under CHYM, yeah. Aiming to raise up to $832 million, targeting a $9.47 billion valuation.
Okay, but what's notable there?
What's really notable, and a key insight from the sources, is that $9.47 billion valuation. It's way below its prior private valuation, which was around $25 billion.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
Tells you a lot about how sentiment and conditions for fintech have shifted, right, in just the last couple of years.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And we should keep an eye out for a couple more IPOs maybe this week.
Yeah, potentially. Circle, the stablecoin issuer, estimated for Thursday under CRCL. Sources highlighted some interesting revenue and growth numbers there. And Omada Health, virtual chronic care provider, estimated for Friday, OMDA. Also solid reported growth.
Okay, one more defense sector again.
Yeah.
SAIC earnings.
Science Applications International, yeah. They reported revenue of $1.88 billion. That was up slightly year over year, about 1.6%, and beat estimates by $7 million.
Right.
But their earnings per share, $1.92, actually missed estimates by $0.20. So maybe some pressure points there despite the revenue beat.
Wow, okay. So we've covered a lot of ground. From that strong market run in May, hitting, immediate headwinds from trade tensions and new tariffs.
To all that activity in biotech M&A, partnerships, drug development news.
Challenges for airlines, critical supply chains like rare earths. Interesting hints about AI's future.
Signals from the IPO market about valuations, especially in tech and fintech, and those warnings about national debt affecting bonds. It's a lot.
It really is a diverse set of developments.
Yeah.
But if you step back, try to connect the dots, it raises an interesting question for you to think about, right?
Yeah, like how might these seemingly disconnected pieces, a specific steel tariff over here, a big cancer drug deal over there, an airline struggling to get planes, plans for a digital assistant. How might they all collectively interact, maybe indirectly reshape the economic landscape that you navigate every single day?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And taking that deep dive into the source material like we just tried to do, that's really how you start seeing those connections, how you gain a real understanding of the different forces driving the news and impacting the world around you.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this exploration today.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back with more deep dives soon.